A Meeting for the Ages. Chapter 2.
The next day, we went to the museum. Brenda is a graceful little woman with a compact body who looks stunning in stylish shorts. Local men are much less reserved than Germans or Norwegians when it comes to someone like her. I said cheerfully, "You have a fan club." She smiled flirtatiously and said, "It's just for you." A guy who had just walked past us came across the mailbox. That was our marriage in a nutshell. Some men view their wives as trophies, living proof of their manhood. I never saw Brenda that way. She was my age and my partner. Her beauty was only one aspect of her contribution to our relationship. It was her spunky spirit and loving, warm heart that made her who she was. But now I was caught in a Chinese finger trap. I pressed my wife more, telling her about Turda. The more she chided me for being mean and jealous. At the same time, I couldn't take Turd aside and tell him to stop pretending to be something he wasn't. I would have looked like a paranoid wuss. I refrained from making any moves, hoping she'd either come to her senses or Turd would screw up by pushing things too far. I'm serious, you have to trust your wife. She's the only person in this cruel world you can rely on. And it's a very slippery slope if you start to have doubts. Maybe I'm being too cynical. But it seemed to me that Brenda's inherent faith in humanity was her Achilles' heel. It made her a logical prey for any man cruel enough to take advantage of her innate tenderness. Of course, you'd have to be a jerk to do that. But I knew one person who fit that description. Shakespeare was the first to record, "All the world is a stage, and one man plays many parts in his time." In short, what you think is reality is written and directed by you in your own head. Turd could have been a buffoon as Captain America, alpha dog of the pack. But alas, he didn't know that. In fact, he thought he was entitled to every right and privilege, and that's exactly how he acted. The reality of his aggressive attempts to play Brenda off made him a threat, because she couldn't see it. So I had to do something about it. There are probably some people who really get away with cheating, but most couples get caught because it's such a complicated process. If you cheat, you have to keep track of all the normal stuff, plus a whole bunch of abnormal stuff. And normal people just can't cover all the bases. That's why people who do things they shouldn't do will inevitably be exposed. Unexplained behavior always has a logical explanation. This truth applies in every area of life. For example, this is how scientists discovered the planet Neptune. They noticed that the orbit of Uranus was deviating from the norm, made calculations, and discovered that Neptune was pulling behind it. This is why the phenomenon of hidden influence is called the planetary body principle. The same concept applies to fraud. There is always some evil agency behind cheating normal behavior. Watching Turd and Brenda socialize at parties, I could see him trying to pull her into his orbit. So I made the decision to cross the Rubicon. I used the 6 days before the next party to visit the market and purchase a simple package of a middle-aged man. I did it harmlessly. After all, if you start buying military-grade hacking tools at a bazaar, on the deep web, you will quickly become a person of great interest to agencies, both foreign and domestic. I threw a hack attack at the next barbecue. I sat with the rest of the weirdos, and Turd hung around looking like someone had touched his dog. Brenda watched him carefully as I asked her not to. I scanned Turd's cell phone. Naturally, it was wide open. He never bothered with such silly problems as protecting his phone from the likes of me. Of course, the only reliable way he could protect it from me would be to run it over with his car. But I digress. It took less than a minute to drop my pet on Turd's cell phone. He immediately sent Brenda a picture of the adorable kitten. The flying monkey was hidden in the steganography. She opened the picture and gave Turd an adoring look. Everything else was done by the rootkit she'd launched while doing so. Turd looked confused, as he should have, because they both had no idea how much invisible crap I'd just added to the background processes running on both their devices. From now on, everything they did, photos, calls, and texts, would be under my control and recorded in a cloud account I owned. I looked at my wife, who was comforting Tadwell. She was wearing a short sundress with fabulously long tanned legs sticking out from underneath. She radiated life and happiness. I felt a rush of melancholy. I said to myself under my breath, "Brenda, I hardly knew you." It was a paradox of paradoxes.
I wanted to know, I needed to know, but I didn't want to know. Healthy people don't dwell on life-destroying events like this. It proved that I wasn't as cool and self-sufficient as I pretended to be. The world is a tough place, and a good marriage helps you through all the hardships. It gives you a companion and a friend, no matter the threat or circumstance. So I really wanted to write off my suspicions as simple paranoia. I could live with a low opinion of myself. What I could not bear was a discovery that would cost me an orderly and happy life. A figurative symbol of two people's commitment is their willingness to limit their relationship to each other. Seriously, you can't share your personal self with more than one person and maintain a special bond. And you can't trust someone who thinks you can. The problem is that humans are not naturally monogamous. Therefore, it takes a conscious act of will to remain faithful. Strong and moral people will keep their promises. People without honor will not. Therefore, in many ways, fidelity is a litmus test of a person's character. I had known Brenda for a very long time and understood how important personal integrity was to her. So I couldn't imagine circumstances in which she would willingly sacrifice her precious self-esteem, especially to scratch an itch. Theoretically, of course. But if you're secretly trying to learn something, you shouldn't be surprised when you learn something new. But I was surprised. The fateful call came at 9:23 a.m. Monday morning after the party. It was Dickhead. Humble gratitude oozed from every pore. Brenda, you're the only person who understands what I'm going through. I don't know what I would have done to myself if it weren't for your love. It's so hard for me to stay away from you, knowing what we've shared. My heart dropped. Brenda said with desperation in her voice. I've already told you, Richard, that I don't love you. I love my husband. I'm only doing this to help you adjust to your new life without Polly. What do I do? My brain went into attack mode, Turd said with regret in his voice. I know that, but it's the only thing keeping me afloat. We can get together soon. I really need your special comfort. Brenda said, her voice softening. I understand. I'd feel the same way if I knew Davy was circling the drain. We can meet one last time. But you're going to have to go through this without my help. I don't want to lose my marriage because you can't handle it. Seriously? That woman was completely delusional? The rest of the conversation boiled down to arrangements. Tudwell was going to come to Holloman on some Air Force business and wanted Brenda to meet him in Alamogordo the following Wednesday. That was over 200 miles away. So it must have been a safe distance to meet, Brenda pondered. But Turd's pathetic whining eventually overcame her resistance. Brenda's company owns a fleet of small two-seat helicopters. They use them to fly around their territory. In order to take part in the game of real estate development in New Mexico, you will have to do this because the desert places are not so close to each other. So Brenda had a private helicopter pilot's license and was used to flying to different places. It was one of her most interesting quirks. She could easily fly to Alamogordo and back in one workday. You might think my wife is either a complete idiot. No one with an IQ above room temperature would fall for Turd's bullshit. But this man has been harassing her for God knows how long to intimidate her. Apparently he's succeeded. Brenda was innately kind, heartfelt, and sentimental. She loved puppies and kittens and cried at every heartwarming movie. Unfortunately, she was also willing to fool herself into believing that people meant exactly what they said. The call ended with Brenda saying, I'll meet you at the usual place, but this is the last time. Turd replied with tears in his voice. Yes, I know, and thank you. My initial reaction was a confused, vacant-eyed, oh shit. Look, the kind Wile E. Coyote always gets when he discovers he's run off a cliff. And like the coyotes, it was immediately followed by a long fall. How could Brenda have been so stupid? Stroke, heart attack, take your pick. You are walking down the street, not caring about anything in the world, and then your life changes. All your previous certainties evaporate and are replaced by a terrible and all-consuming feeling of desolation and hopelessness. That's how it is with me. The first explosion of anger was directed at myself. I had underestimated Turd. He was such a caricature of a man. I assumed everyone could see right through him. But, of course, I wasn't present for the long hours he spent at our kitchen table, painting a different picture for his wife. Turd must have convinced Brenda that he was sensitive and sincere. Underneath all that crap was a genuinely nice man.
In fact, he may have used what Brenda knew of his asshole personality as a form of mental jujitsu to convince her that his obnoxious behavior was meant to protect his gentle self from the hardships of a cold, cruel world.
It would be a godsend for Brenda. Since Turd's social development didn't extend beyond the age of 14, it probably didn't occur to him that there might be consequences. I'm not a physical type, but I do have a certain set of skills, and I was planning to shit on Richard Tadwell from a very great height. It was Monday. I had business at Sandia, but the rage burning in my heart demanded satisfaction. I didn't know the whole story yet. What's more, I wasn't even sure anything had happened at all. My little pet hadn't unearthed any new information since Monday morning. Nevertheless, I prepared for the worst. I was going to be in Alamogordo until the last act, because I had to officially finalize the settlements with Brenda. Then I could agonize in peace. Of course, my decision to wrap things up on Wednesday meant that I would have to endure 2 nights with a woman who was doing her best to appear to adore me. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. This means that people combine contradictory facts into a convenient truth. In essence, a person divides themselves into 2 conflicting identities. Tonight I dealt with the real Brenda, the faithful and loyal one. The short-lived version of cheating only came up when I wasn't around. I tried to see a single sign that my wife was thinking about betraying me. All I saw was love and loyalty. Her eyes shone with devotion when we ate at La Crêpe Michel, a small place we prefer because of the vegetarian dishes. She truly believed her lies. It made me wonder if she was crazy. Perhaps the stress of adultery turns a person into a nutcase, especially if they are a decent person at heart. Even then, temporary insanity can serve as a defense, but that's not the case with adultery. I could have begged Brenda not to go, told her I knew the whole story, but nothing about our situation would have changed. She was past the point of no return. So my goal was retribution, not reconciliation. Tudwell was to be severely punished, and it would be a true example of hacking. First, I needed pictures. Then I was going to expose Turd's sordid life to everyone on his contact list: wife, mother, pastor, all the way up to the commander and possibly the Secretary of the Air Force. The beauty of it was that I didn't leave any fingerprints. I mean, the incriminating evidence was sent by Turd's own cell phone. He'd know it was me.
And everyone else would be wondering why the guy decided to end his career and his personal life. Having access to a man's fate in one hand is exhilarating. Then I'd really kick his ass. By the end of the day, Turd would have 150 new mortgages and a couple thousand new Visa cards. Besides, Interpol and the FBI are going to want to talk to him. After the fruits of this atrocity fell to the ground, I planned to send the dude a note, no doubt to his new address under the bridge abutment. Really, Tud, don't thank me. It was my pleasure. Revenge really is best served cold. I left for work at the usual time. Brenda was as beautiful and vital as ever as she kissed me goodbye. I just couldn't understand it. The love in her eyes was genuine. She was going to have to explain it to me the next time we talked. Of course, that would be east of Eden after our expulsion from the garden. The trip takes 4 hours by car, so I didn't get to Alamogordo until closer to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Time-wise, it's more like an hour and a half at 120 miles per hour. Brenda's Dynally H3 was parked in the desert behind the Quality Inn and Suites on White Sands Boulevard. It was the yellow and white car she especially likes to fly. Since Brenda had already arrived, I figured I could start chopping nuts right away. It was the usual chain hotel that serviced Holloman Air Force Base. I walked into the lobby in business clothes. The guy behind the counter didn't look up. I sat in one of the chairs in the lobby and used my iPad to hack into the hotel server. All it took was a simple fake receptionist. These 2 were in room 217. Tadwell booked it under his own name. I thought, what an arrogant fool. I don't like messy confrontations. They accomplish nothing, and they tend to get out of hand. My profession gives me access to cool toys. That's why I brought Aardvark with me. It was one of those technological marvels. Our guys want to know the situation before they kick down the door. That's why they use Wark. It's a black plastic with a flat probe designed to peek under any standard door frame, hence the name. The camera gives the user a panoramic view of the room. It records HD audio and video. There are 4 IR channels in case the room is dark. This will give me everything I need to take down Tudwell. I heard joyful sounds as I introduced this thing into the room. Brenda is very loud and boisterous when she does this. I could hear her proclaiming, "Oh yeah, that's it." It made me freeze for a second, and the horrible knot that was now forever tied in my stomach twitched painfully once more. Still, it made me feel good to hear it, because it hardened my heart. From now on, there would be no turning back. They left the curtains open. After all, it was the second floor, so the scene was well lit. The hot desert sun illuminated my beautiful wife. Honestly, I didn't want to look at it. I had everything I needed. So I pulled out the device, put it in my backpack, and walked down to the Starbucks in the lobby to await my fate. I was sipping a decent hazelnut coffee, while I used Filmmaker Pro to create a 60-second video of Turd's greatest hits. It turned out to be an incriminating and very hot video. I intentionally made it short. Some servers have size filters, and I wanted the whole world to witness Tudwell's betrayal. Besides, I didn't want the viewer's attention span to wane. Of course, that was unlikely. I made it clear that Turd, in his cinematic debut, was an extremely unfaithful husband. His face was the center of attention. I carefully edited the movie to keep Brenda's face out of the frame. I didn't want to communicate my asshole status to the world, and I still loved the silly fool. Once I was satisfied with the clip, I emailed it from Turd's phone. It was on top of his pants pocket, which he hastily discarded. Isn't wireless technology great? He sent out incriminating evidence to his 139 phone contacts with the headline, "Fun Times." That should have really set the skunk free at the Women's Bridge Club.
Dear viewers, our journey through the dark corridors of betrayal continues. In the second chapter of our story, we see reality and Dave's suspicions come face to face, forcing him to resort to measures from which there is no return. Brenda, Dave's wife, finds herself at the epicenter of his agonizing suspicions. Her alleged attraction to a hidden neighbor, Turd, leads Dave to decide to find the truth at any cost. But the fight for the truth turns his life upside down and reveals secrets he didn't want to know about. It's fascinating to watch Dave prepare a trap for Turd using his intelligence and technological skills. But even as the plans begin to come to fruition, Dave realizes that not everything is so clear-cut. On the one hand, he longs for justice, but on the other, the fear of betrayal makes his suffering unbearable. Brenda, whose tears and despair make the moments of their separation particularly tragic, faces fate, and her actions bring devastating consequences. Yet the forthrightness and honesty with which she confesses her feelings and mistakes in the face of the impending breakup demands our empathy and understanding. What will be the final denouement of this drama? Will a gust of wind of change await us, or a world where Dave will be left alone with a broken heart? The answers to these questions await you in the next installment. Stay tuned to find out what steps Dave will take and whether his actions will reflect his true feelings and desires. The full version of Chapter 2 is available on our Patreon for those who are not afraid to delve into the depths of the human soul and open the curtain on the darker sides of love relationships.